34-year-old mixed martial artist Jon Bones Jones is a force to be reckoned with inside the Octagon. Jones is set to debut in the UFC's heavyweight division later this year and hasn't fought since February 2020 when he beat Dominick Reyes at UFC 247. Many people suspect that Jones is going to do some heavy damage in the division and obliterate his opponents. So stay tuned and don't go away, because Henry Cejudo shares the only way to beat former UFC light heavyweight champion Jon Jones. First up, what's the only way to beat Jon Jones? You're about to find out. According to Henry Cejudo, an interim title bout between Bones and Stipe Miocic is the perfect opportunity for Jones to enter into the heavyweight division. But Cejudo doesn't think Miocic has what it takes to beat Jones. In a recent interview, Cejudo said, "The way you beat a guy like Jon Jones, you're going to have to beat him with power. You're going to have to take risks, and that's going to be with power. This is why Francis Ngannou and Jon Jones is a very dynamite fight, because you have technician. Jon Jones knows how to win. The only person that could really counter that is a guy that takes risks, someone who can throw out the kitchen sink." Cejudo thinks that Jones could fight another 10 fights and retire undefeated. Cejudo argues that if Jones versus Miocic happens, fans will really be able to see Jon's creativity on display, something Cejudo says Miocic simply doesn't have. "We all saw Miocic knock out Fabricio Werdum, but Werdum had really sort of walked into the punch that knocked him out, so Miocic doesn't have a great deal of knockout power. Miocic's best asset as a fighter is his endurance. The only way to beat Jon Jones is with power. You can't beat him with attacks, counterattacks, and simply trying to anticipate what he'll do. Jon Jones is the UFC's best fighter, and if you want to beat him, you need a lot of two things: power and creativity. Miocic certainly has some of both, but as far as Cejudo's concerned, not enough." Next up, how is Jeff Molina reacting to fan backlash for wearing UFC's Pride Month shorts? Let's take a look. Jeff Molina has harsh words for some members of the MMA community. Molina, a UFC flyweight prospect, fought and won on Saturday, June 4th, while wearing rainbow-colored shorts that the UFC released in support of Pride Month. Molina won via split decision win over Jaugas Jumagulov at UFC Fight Night 207, but said he received a ton of backlash from fans leading up to the fight when he announced he'd be wearing the shorts. Molina, who's only 24 years old, was taken aback by the response and said, "I was honestly shocked, so I picked the colors because I thought it looked cool, and then it also supports a good cause, you know? But I will support anything of a community that's been oppressed and ostracized for some time now, for something they can't help. I'll get behind any of that. I just thought in 2022, people will be like a little more open-minded and not pieces of but I guess I was wrong. It's just crazy to me, like people were saying to me, like crazy." It was clear by Molina's next comments that he had some anger simmering underneath the surface when he said, "Dude, it's effing ridiculous, man. Who would have thunk that in 2022, people are still, who the F cares, bro? Like, honestly, it's not even about being an ally. I'm not saying I'm not, but it's just like, be a effing decent person. Like, just be a decent human being." Molina went into further detail and scolded judgmental and hateful people. He feels their behaviors is mind-boggling, and he's completely disgusted by it. Props to Molina for not only standing up for his beliefs and values, but standing up for the LGBT community. Up next, has Nate Diaz lost Jorge Masvidal's support regarding Diaz's contract situation with the UFC? Absolutely. Masvidal recently weighed in on Nate Diaz's UFC contract situation and said that Diaz was acting like a diva. Masvidal was on Diaz's side initially, but now Diaz is on his own. Masvidal poked fun at Diaz, saying that the Stockton, California brawler had refused fights. Masvidal said he wouldn't be surprised if Diaz had too much CTE and doesn't understand the paperwork that the UFC is giving him. Masvidal also said he rarely sides with the UFC, but that after hearing about Diaz's behavior and seeing some of it for himself firsthand, he's withdrawing his support. Diaz has repeatedly asked the UFC to book the final fight of his current contract. However, it's believed there's a holdup because the promotion wants to sign him to a new contract, and he won't budge until a new deal is reached. Diaz has turned down several fights, and because of this, the UFC can extend his contract and keep him off the open market. Masvidal has offered to fight Diaz and said he'd like to break his jaw because of all the annoying whining and complaining he's been doing lately. Who do you think would win in a Masvidal versus Diaz rematch? Stay tuned and don't go away, because we're bringing you the latest UFC news. Be sure to watch until the end of the video, because we're revealing what happened when Steve-O and Jon Jones decided to hang out together. Next up, why does Ilia Topuria hate Movsar Evloev? You're about to find out. For weeks, the situation between Ilia Topuria and atmosphere Evloev has been building, and it may have just come to a head. Topuria blasted Evloev for fighting shamefully at UFC Vegas 56 and said that Evloev doesn't have the balls to call him out. Both Topuria and Evloev are the UFC's 2 undefeated featherweight fighters, and both are considered to be the best prospects at 145 pounds. Evloev recently put his talents on display at UFC Vegas 56's co-main event when he dominated Dan Ige and won via decision. After beating Ige, which was the biggest win of Evloev's UFC career, he called out the UFC's number 9 ranked featherweight Arnold Allen at UFC London. And let's just say that the call-out didn't sit well with Topuria. In fact, it set him off. Topuria blasted Evloev on Twitter. Evloev and Topuria were scheduled to meet in the Octagon on January 22nd at UFC 270. However, Evloev ultimately withdrew from the contest as a result of a positive COVID-19 test. Topuria was later pulled from the card as well. At the time of this recording, it's anyone's guess if a matchup between Evloev and Topuria will ever be rebooked. Obviously, Topuria wants the fight, but at least for now, Evloev has bigger goals and is setting his sights higher. At a press conference following the Ige fight, Evloev said, "I'm ready for next week. Just give me a good name. I'm tired of fighting with no names, and I deserve good names. And I'm the next champion. Just give me good names. I deserve this. One more thing. I want to say to my division, I'm the next champion." And these comments only made Topuria even angrier. Up next, did Jon Jones really try to give Steve-O cauliflower ear? You bet. However, you can relax because there was nothing nefarious going on. The person Jones smashed in the ear with a hammer was none other than Jackass star Steve-O. Steve-O made an appearance on UFC fighter Daniel Cormier's podcast and opened up about the time that Bones struck him in the ear with a hammer. Jones and Cormier also happen to be longtime rivals. Steve-O, who's known around the world for being a crazy guy with a high threshold for pain, wanted Jones to try and give him cauliflower ear. For those of you who don't know, cauliflower ear is a condition that develops from repeated blows and strikes to the ears. And among MMA and UFC fighters, it's a condition that's not at all uncommon. It all started when Steve-O went to Jones's house. Steve-O put his ear between some barbells, and Jones elbowed them repeatedly. After a few strikes, Jones reportedly told Steve-O that he had cauliflower ear, but a few days later, nothing changed in Steve-O's ears. Most of us would have been grateful, but Steve-O was dissatisfied and annoyed that it hadn't worked. Steve-O told Cormier that he and Jones met up again and that this time, Steve-O was determined to succeed. Finally, what happened when Jones and Steve-O met up again? Refusing to give up on his quest for cauliflower ear, when Steve-O and Jones met up again, Steve-O put his head against the base bar of a piece of exercise equipment. Jones took his light heavyweight championship belt, put it against Steve-O's ear, and repeatedly struck it with a hammer from Home Depot. Suddenly, after repeated strikes from the hammer, blood splattered beneath Jones's championship belt, and at that point, everyone just freaked out. When Steve-O's ear was inspected seconds later, it quickly became clear that his ear was essentially obliterated, and a large piece of the ear was dangling down the side of his head. And here's where things get even crazier. There was some discussion about what to do with the piece of dangling ear, and it was decided that they should simply cut it off. So, Jones took a pair of scissors and snipped off the piece. That's a wrap for today's video.